Have Dr. Mike Carron with us now, who is the program director for GoMRI. And as LaDon mentioned before that, he was the director of the Northern Gulf Institute based out of Mississippi State. So he has a Mississippi history himself, and he is going to give us a talk on GoMRI science. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Carron.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. You know, I've spent most of my career at Stennis Space Center. And I've lived in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, most of my professional life. So it's kind of nice to be back, at least electronically. I also want to thank Sea Grant team for organizing these events. I think this is the fourth one. They've been excellent, and a great opportunity to share, what we've done and what's happening in the future. I also want to thank the panelists that are going to follow me. We have a great group of research leaders that'll be speaking to you, and they have been, working very hard to deliver critical science to the community. And I'll move on. David mentioned about funding in the Gulf of Mexico, and I think this graph, although it sort of ends around 2011, is pretty representative of how the Gulf of Mexico has been treated in the past. This is a Boehm graph of funding. The little blue bars represent funding that has come to the Gulf of Mexico. The dark sort of green graphs, the Great Lakes, and the Chesapeake Bay is represented by the green bars. As you can see, up until the time of the Deepwater Horizon spill, the Gulf of Mexico has always been sort of a stepsister. Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative came in and funded, starting about around 2010 into 11, about where that arrow is pointing, at about that level, around $45 million a year, up until 2020. And so that's where we are now. And so we're hoping that, the collaborations we built and all of the new skill sets that have been developed in the Gulf of Mexico, universities and their related and other research teams that they have built will be able to continue the funding level more than we've had in the far past. Next view graph, please. Yeah, this kind of gives you an idea, a rough idea of where the GoMRI money has gone. The GoMRI consortia have been led by all of the consortia have been led by Gulf state institutions with both national and international partners. We have the benefit of a lot of money that may or may not be available in the future through the federal government. We hope that other organizations can pick up some of the need for the Gulf of Mexico, because so much happens in the Gulf of Mexico. But it clearly demonstrates that, the nation is prepared, and every one of these dots represents people that now know about the Gulf of Mexico, know a lot more about it, and have been working, collaborating with our leaders from the Gulf of Mexico. And please notice that there were 17 other countries that were funded at the same time as part of these teams. And so this has been a great thing that we've built. What I'm going to do now is move into just give you a little bit of a high level walkthrough of some of the research findings. The people that will follow me will give you a lot more specifics. As you will hear today, and you've already heard, we've made a huge investment in oil spill and transport modeling, which requires an investment in learning more about surface and subsurface currents. Those studies have brought to light improved understanding of large scale, medium scale, and fine scale currents that affect particle movement. These will improve future oil spill tracking for the next time there's an oil spill, and there will be another oil spill, either from a ship or a rig. Coast Guard vessels and personnel recovery and people need to understand where the oil is going to go to be able to position response, ships and skimmers and things like that. And so they need to be able to predict that a few days out so they can get those things into place. This little second figure here you see is what it was already mentioned, the marine snow that Dennis Wiesenberg mentioned. Research has shown that microbes and plankton have distinct interactions with oil in the marine environment, subsequently forming this stuff that you see here on this view graph that we call marine snow. The oil clumps together and falls to the bottom. In the presence of the dispersants like Corexit, sometimes inhibited the formation of microbial generated marine snow. which stopped it from falling to the bottom. Estimates of up to 10 to 15% of more of oil was bound up in the matrix after the Deepwater Horizon spill and was transported to the bottom. And in the future, we hope that knowledge of this will help NOAA and the other responders understand how much oil actually went to the bottom. This third one shows back in the laboratory. This is a photograph came from Johns Hopkins Universities, working with some of the researchers from the Gulf of Mexico. And they used high-speed imaging and digital holography in the laboratory to actually see what happens when a raindrop hits the surface with and without oils, without dispersant, hitting oil, and the little pieces fly up into the atmosphere. Oftentimes these particles were submicron in size and could escape into the air and stay there and drift across land, or the people that were actually working on the ships, and that could have an impact on their health. Next view graph, we'll talk a little bit about published science of biodegradation. This is really important in the Gulf of Mexico. We've had a large number of ecology results within the GoMRI community. It was not surprising at all to our research to find out that there was a resident pre-prepared microbial community in which has evolved over millions of years from natural oil and gas seeps. So all of these microbes responded to oil because oil was energy for them to use. The first figure that you see here, we found also that once oil hit the beach areas, that there was an increase in oil degrading bacteria followed by a return to a more non-diverse, non-oil degrading bacteria that followed it. So what happened was oil hit the beaches, immediately the bacteria that lives in the beaches and that had been processing oil for a long time bloomed. It was like a fertilizer. And then quickly they processed as much of the oil as they could process, and then things started returning back to normal. The next view graph shows, the next figure, I'm sorry, go back to one. Yeah, research has found that bacteria grew faster when the oil-water interface was supplemented with dissolved organic nitrogen. So this was like fertilizer. And since then, there's much less nitrogen in the deep ocean and it's colder there. So degradation was much slower when you get away from the coastlines and in the deeper ocean. Similarly, this third figure shows that the high pressure in the deep ocean also impacted bacterial growth and oil degradation abilities. Next view graph, please. Yeah, we'll talk about marshes. Obviously marshes are really important to the Gulf of Mexico. We have a large number of microbial ecology experiments that we did in the Gulf of Mexico. It was not surprising at all to find that research, there was a resident community there that just like that we talked about before. Scientists found that there was an increase in oil-specific degradation, followed by, hold on a second here, I'm losing my mission, I've lost my point. Here we go. Yeah, so we saw three different things. Damaged vegetation, this first photograph, in non-eroding areas nearly fully recovered after about 1.5 years. In areas already eroding, the oiled marsh grasses died, and that exposed the substrate to increase erosion rate, and it led to permanent loss. And because of sea level rise, we probably won't see those rebuilding out, maybe up. Common coastal inhabitants like dolphins were showed to be seriously impacted by oil spill, and those impacts are continued to be seen today. Research has documented high pregnancy failures, lung damage, not unlike COPD and emphysema, and those are still present in some of the dolphins today. After nearly 9 years, there's still evidence of deep water oil in the marshes of Louisiana, which have penetrated deep into the sediment, often through fiddler crab holes. So the oil would go down into those holes, things would start growing on top of it, and if there was a big storm or something, some of that oil can recover and come back up to the surface. In the deep waters, scientific investigations clearly indicate the baseline data for the Gulf was scant to non-existent. I mean, it's really expensive to do research in deep water. And so we didn't have a lot of information about what happens way down in the Gulf of Mexico, although there was some, but not very much. Research has observed many rare and new species, though, over the last 10 years. It's been pretty exciting. There's been a fascinating yet poorly understood community in the deeper waters of the Gulf of Mexico and what we call the mesopelagic community, the middle depth communities. It is made up of crustaceans, of large plankton, young fish, and adult fish that are adapted to living in the deeper, darker parts. You've seen these monstrous-looking fish. Most of them are very small, but they're adapted with big eyes and big teeth to be able to survive down there. These organisms are important prey for whales and larger pelagic organisms, pelagic meaning deep sea. And you'll hear more about this later. Scientists documented damage to some of the very delicate deepwater coral communities, the second photograph, both near and away from the oil spill site. These corals can be hundreds of years old and they have a really slow growth rate, and recovery will take a long time, hundreds of years for them, some of them to recover, particularly within, say, 10 miles of the Deepwater Horizon accident. Even in very deep water, the Gulf microbial community response to oil spill was very rapid. Methane concentrations in the deepwater plumes peaked in May and in early June, coincident with the rapid rise in abundance of activity of these methane oxidizing microbes, like we talked about actually earlier near the surface. But then the oxidation activity dropped off fairly quickly because once the methane stopped, once they actually stopped the well, stuff down deep didn't have the stuff they needed from the methane to eat, so they stopped eating it. Dispersants are a big question. You've heard about it forever. And so we put a lot of effort into studying what happens with dispersants. Study on the interactions of oil degrading bacteria found that dispersants can impact the bacteria's natural oil degradation processes. In some cases, it helped the degradation by making smaller droplets available for bacteria to actually process the oil. In other cases, though, it may have inhibited the bacteria's chance to actually get to the oil and stick to it and process and essentially eat the oil. Researchers addressing these predictions from multiple oil spill models found that subsea dispersants used during the response may reduce oil droplet size, which is good because they can be processed. Other of interest is another study conducted by one of our Florida teams suggested due to pressure and gas flow at the Deepwater Horizon site, oil droplets may have been small anyway. Researchers used this this photograph at the bottom here, autoclave apparatus to visually capture oil droplets in water under high pressure. They measured oil droplet size and simulated oil dispersion under conditions similar to those at the Deepwater wellhead, and report that based on modeling, dispersant applied at the wellhead slightly reduced the oil droplet size. They were sometimes dispersed automatically from the gas mixed with the oil. So the speculation as to whether dispersants may or may not have helped microbial degradation, and on the other hand, it may have slowed microbial degradation. So we're still studying that. As Rita mentioned, we're really proud of our legacy. Some of this has already been discussed. The impressive amount of research funding, in addition to the construct of GoMRI, bridged the research gap between the actual event disaster and the establishment of longer-term Gulf research and restoration programs. And it allowed for critical data collection and scientific discovery. Through this consortium networks, we've actually built multiple teams of organizations of competitors to work together to study these things. Some of these teams have actually gone on and studied the Hercules gas well blowout in the Gulf of Mexico, Santa Barbara oil spill, the Monte Carlo spillway release, and the Galveston oil spill. In addition to nurturing collaborative research among the scientists, GoMRI has provided opportunities for over 1,400 master's and PhD students. And this, as mentioned before, this next generation of scientists has their educational footholds in the Gulf region and will be able to bring their expertise back to the Gulf, and they understand the Gulf a lot better. The Gulf of Mexico Oil Spill and Ecosystem Conference was a real opportunity for us to teach the people in the Gulf of Mexico what we were doing. And Laura's already mentioned the Gulf of Mexico Conference, which will follow on that. Dr. Caldwell mentioned the Gulf of Mexico Information and Data Cooperative, and we're working very closely with Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi, who manages that, and Mississippi State University that manages our information management system, which is sort of metadata on all of the researches and the papers and stuff that they've written. At the time of the Deepwater Horizon event, there was a lack of knowledge and data. And during the length of this 10-year program and even beyond, GoMRI scientists have contributed significantly to the body of knowledge of ocean spill science and improved the baseline information in the Gulf of Mexico, particularly in the deep sea. That did not exist before this last 10 years. As of today, almost 1,500 peer-reviewed journal articles have been attributed to GoMRI, and there's more to come. So thank you for joining this talk. And